Hello, Professor. This is Yihuang Shao. I'm doing assignment number 5. The subject I pick is anorexia nervosa. So as you can see from the first picture I submitted, there's a girl whose mouth is covered by tape. There's some words written on it. It's I just want eat. So if I ask you to guys to guess what kind of disease is this, probably it's very easy to guess. It's anorexia nervosa, which is one of the most common eating disorders since 1980s. Many people, especially in medical and doctoral field, not only considering this as eating disorder, but also consider this as a psychiatric disorder. So the question is, what is exactly anorexia nervosa? So the formal definition for anorexia nervosa is that it's a serious, often chronic, and a lifetime eating disorder. Well, if people have this, they refuse to have enough intake. They only try to maintain minimal body weight, sometimes about 15% of an individual's normal weight. So for the second picture I submitted, this actually is a perfect description of what is anorexia nervosa. So there's a girl, it's a very slim girl sitting there right in front of the mirror, but what she can see is that not exactly herself, but a fat girl, which is a very typical symptom of the anorexia nervosa patients. So they basically have the intense fear of weight gaining, and they always hold a distorted body image. So we're just wondering, because this some people can't stop wondering that the anorexia nervosa has just probably gained enough attention until the past 3 years. So is there like a lot of patients back in like 300 or 400 years back there? So the truth is that actually there is, but there is not called anorexia nervosa. The anorexia nervosa was arise just around 1874. Before that time, people always refers the disease that people refuse to take enough food as just anorexia. So actually, there's a huge difference between the anorexia and the anorexia nervosa. Okay, so as we want to explain what's the difference between those two, we probably want to introduce a story that how the anorexia nervosa rise in Hong Kong back in 1990s. So talking about anorexia nervosa, this kind of disease is a very special one, because it is actually a disease have been observed its occurrence and how it's developed have been observed in the past 20 to 30 years. Especially there's a very special case in Hong Kong that the anorexia nervosa was never existed in Hong Kong before 1990s. Wow, the first case of anorexia nervosa in Hong Kong actually occurred in the 1990s. So in the book The Crazy Like Us, The Globalization of American Psych, which written by Anthony Waters, tells us a story about a Dr. Lee, who's a leader expert in treating the eating disorders. So back in 1990s, as a researcher in eating disorder, Dr. Lee has treated a few patients with eating disorders. He simply put them in the group as anorexia, which is not a very new kind of disease compared to anorexia nervosa. These patients basically hold the same symptoms of the anorexia nervosa. They can't eat a lot of food. They have very low body weight, but the main thing is that they realize they are very thin and they are trying to gain their weight, but it is impossible for them to do because sometimes after they eat things, they start to feel vomit. They just can't eat the things. And as the Dr. Lee tries to treat these patients, there's one of his patients is actually a high school girl. Well, there's one day, because the anorexia nervosa is very hard to treat, so there's one day this high school girl, because don't have enough food inside herself, so she actually passed out on the road. And after she been sent into the hospital, the media, the news reporters started to notice that there's one girl that passed out on the street, and the reason she passed out on the street is not because drunk or something. It's because that she can't eat food. So what this media do is that they search online without consulting all the professionals. They concluded this thing as anorexia nervosa, which actually is not, because anorexia nervosa patients basically has a very distorted body image. They know they are those anorexia nervosa patients didn't realize that they are already losing a lot of weight compared to the traditional anorexia patients. So after reporting this, Dr. Lee started to realize that after the 4 years after this report, there's hundreds to thousands of people start to report that they have anorexia nervosa, which has never been happened before. So this makes Dr. Lee start to think about what is exactly the cause of anorexia nervosa. So probably, as everybody knows, there was one time there's a psychiatric disorder which is called hysteria. It's very common in females back in about 1,000 years ago in Europe. It only disappears around the 18,000s. So there's a lot of similar things between the hysteria and anorexia nervosa. Is that people don't really have a physical or neural damage. They just feel that they can't eat things, or they can feel a pain on the body where it doesn't really exist. So basically all those things are called a psychiatric disorder, because there's no physical or neural functional problems. So these two things make the Dr. Lee start to wondering what is exactly the cause of the anorexia nervosa. So he proposed one concept called the symptoms pool. Is that a lot of patients, especially in female case, have internal stress that cannot be expressed. So let's imagine there's a pool full of symptoms. While we put the symptoms into the pool, these patients start to find symptoms can express their unexpressed internal stress out. So the reason why hysteria disappears around the 1980s, around the 1800s, is because that as the society starts to develop, it can no longer stand for their internal stress, but they still to look for new symptoms can express their internal stress. So during the development of anorexia nervosa in Hong Kong, as the reporters start to report this kind of disease, they unintentionally adding the symptoms into the symptom pools. So all these patients start to pick up the symptoms from the symptoms pool, which makes the anorexia nervosa start to spreading around Hong Kong. So after talking about anorexia nervosa, we still to realize that the psychiatric disorder sometimes is much more complicated than what we think it could be. It always involves not only the sometimes the neural or physical disorders. Sometimes it includes the ethical aspects or sometimes the social aspects. So as the culture spreading around the world, the media starts to play a very important role in people's social life. So probably the psychiatrist is going to exploring what is those roles cooperating with each other and can induce the psychiatric disorder inside of people. Thanks.